Historically, trees have always been important in Ireland, and in future, they could be our greatest allies.
We face many challenges over coming years. Farmers have their difficulties, so maybe it's time to rethink how we use our land.
There are ambitious targets in place to plant 300,000 hectares of trees over the next 20 years, one of the biggest land use changes in this country in centuries. Forestry is proving to be economically viable for farmers and good for rural Ireland. More trees will reduce impacts of climate change and also provide greater resilience to flooding.
Planting trees is definitely a good thing, but as an ecologist, I'm also concerned about how we plan our future forests.
Every time we plant a tree, it's there for more than our lifetime, and it changes everything around it.
Whether these impacts are positive or negative depends on what we plant and how we manage it.
Because it's making big changes to the economy, to the landscape, and to the environment.
Woods are among my favourite places to be. I just love the layers of luscious growth. Every nook and cranny is a habitat to some specially adapted plant or creature. Woodlands once covered most of Ireland. They're the natural climax vegetation of our landscape, and they're diverse, rich and productive ecosystems.
This is a lovely spot, isn't it? So we've got kind of natural woodland nature reserve there.
Yeah, so this is the Clara Nature Reserve. So canopy is dominated by oak. And then in the understory, because we're on acid soils here in Wicklow, we have things like birch and holly and less of the hazel. Down closer to the river you get hazel, where you're onto the more alkaline soils.
And are there many different types of woodlands then around Ireland? Is there much of a variety?
Yeah, oh yeah, they're kind of specific depending on the soil, depending on the geology. Yeah,
and then this is quite different behind us here.
Yeah, so this is a plantation. This valley would have been wooded, you know, for as far back as we know, and this is now dominated by conifers because they would have been grown for their commercial value. If you go to plant a forest, you have a huge outlay of money required to go and plant all the seed. If you look at what nature is doing, it's producing all the seed itself, and it's there in the soil and it's waiting to happen. Both these woodlands are actually acting as protection forests for the river and protecting the water quality in the river.
How do they do that?
Well, all the trees are taking up any nutrients that would be running down. They're reducing flow, they're reducing runoff from land, they're slowing flooding risk. They obviously have a huge role for biodiversity in terms of all the fauna. This is actually the valley where we first recorded woodpecker breeding in Ireland, which has all happened in the last 10 years.
Ireland has approximately 11% forest cover, the lowest in the EU. Native woodlands, like Clara Wood, make up only 1% of this number. And much of the rest are conifer plantations for commercial forestry. That is mostly monoculture rotational plantations that are clear-felled every 30 to 40 years and then replanted, which has been the commercial forestry model for the last 70 years. The majority of land in Ireland is privately owned farmland, so in order to increase tree cover, forests need to be planted on agricultural land. But this will only happen if it's commercially viable for farmers. Billy Faulkner is a cattle farmer in Mulla, County Cavan, who's become disillusioned with beef farming.
there'll be less problems with it gives them a little bit of a head start on the grass and give it a bit of a tug.
So why have you decided not to plant a forest?
I think somebody asked me that earlier on, and I said I could give an honest answer or a dishonest answer.
Yeah, okay, if you've got two answers.
Well, I could say the dishonest answer would be that I have an interest in trees or whatever and helping the planet or whatever. But the honest answer would be I'm just totally pissed off at farming. So
you're pissed off at farming? Why?
Yeah, can I say that?
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, you're pissed off at farming. Yeah. Tell me why. I've
been at it for so many years, and the longer it goes on, the harder it seems to get to make ends meet at farming. And how difficult is it for you? I mean, if you say... Well, I heard a phrase earlier this year where a guy said how he was a slave to the bag of fertiliser. And certainly with a smallish farms, you do tend to be, you have to be intensive. You use a lot of fertiliser, which is not great for the environment either. And so it just made me think. Farming is no different from any other job in life. I mean, if you have a big, massive farm, you can make ends meet, you know, but when you're operating, and a lot of the farms in around this area would be smallish farms. So it's very hard to make a living of it. Planting trees is probably the second most profitable enterprise after dairying at the moment. I think the statistics show that. And how much land now are you planting here? And what species are you planting? We're planting about 50 acres here at the moment. There'll be about 12 to 13 acres of hardwood. And the rest is spruce, Jared. Yeah, the rest is spruce. But mostly a big chunk of broadleaves here. Big chunk of broadleaves, yeah, because I think it's more aesthetic. And do you now expect to make a good income from this by planting? You know, is this going to be more viable for you as a farmer? Well, I can't be doing any worse. I suppose, yeah. I hope so, yeah, that it will show return.
I was curious to see what Billy's conifer plantation would look like in the future. Eugene Kern from the Forest Service took me to a neighbouring farm where the plantation had just undergone its first thinning. So Eugene, how long will it take now for Billy's forest to look like this?
Approximately 15 to 20 years. I would say it depends on the land, and Billy's land is really good. So I'd expect it to be reaching this stage in around 15 years, maybe 16 years' time. So is this the typical model of a commercial forest in Ireland today? It is. Primarily, it would be Sitka spruce plantations. There would be thinned at around 15 years and every 5 years after, and then with a clear felt situation between 30 and 35 years, and then replanted, and the process would start all over again. At one stage, it seemed as though agriculture and forestry were in competition, but as the years go by, a lot of farmers just see it as another crop, and they're accepting the fact that it's more of a long-term crop, but it's still a crop.
As a crop, trees can have a huge impact on their surroundings because of their size and longevity. The forest and timber industry have created thousands of livelihoods in Ireland in recent years. However, commercial forestry as we know it can have environmental impacts, depending on how it's managed, affecting soil, water quality and biodiversity. The grant system now offers supports for forests that are managed in a more environmentally sensitive way, and this can still prove to be financially viable.
Most of the funding is geared at promoting non-monoculture plantations. We want to get some diversity in there. We want to get more broadleaves in there. We want it to look well in the landscape. We want to protect water. We've got something in there of a forest for fibre, which is going to help promote the production of biofuels and renewable energy. It's all about getting the right tree in the right place and done in the right way.
For thousands of years, farmers have known that it's much easier to work with nature rather than against it. But for too long now, trees and farming have not been seen as compatible.
Thanks very much, nice to meet you.
A new take on an old, tried and tested farming technique is called Agroforestry. Liam Beechnor is one of the first to try this system on his farm in West Cork.
Tell me, Liam, what is agroforestry?
Agroforestry is a combination really of agriculture and forestry in the one place together, you know.
On the one piece of land?
On the one piece of land, yeah. I mean, it's a very new concept.
And how did you come across it?
My forestry inspector actually suggested this to me. It was a plan that was in his head, and he was looking around for suitable candidates to try this. And I jumped at the chance, really, just to try it and see how we get on with it. And that's where we ended up by doing agroforestry.
What tree species have you planted up?
This is all ash here now.
All ash?
Yeah. Originally, what I was going to do was farm this with sheep all year long, you know?
That is amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, I mean, we think of planting trees in a plot of land and you're
Correct.
putting that field aside just for forestry.
That's right.
Or you're keeping it for stock.
Correct.
To have both here, not just, you've got the sheep, you've got the trees and the silage.
That's right. The usual run of things with a forestry is the forestry company, they take care of the tree for the first 4 years of its life. And after that, then it's kind of up to yourself, or I'm sure you can employ them to continue on maintaining the plot if you so wish.
And that means you're going to have really excellent quality timber in what kind of time frame? 30 years? Or?
Oh, it would be a bit less than that now, I would imagine. Generally about, for this crop, I'm hoping somewhere around the 20-year region or thereabouts.
Rather than being in conflict, farming and forestry can complement each other. As the sheep graze around the trees, they fertilise them, and the trees in turn provide shelter for the farm animals.
All along, it was just a field, and it was up to myself as to what I'd done with it. I wasn't getting any return from it. Whereas now, I'm getting a small bit of a premium on the field from the trees. I'm still using it for agriculture. I'm still producing silage, and we have the sheep on it as well, so not the normal farming practices. So that's how I work out.
That's brilliant. And do your neighbours think you're absolutely mad?
Well, I don't know if you would have to ask the neighbours that.
Farmers can also grow food crops under trees or keep poultry. Agroforestry enables a symbiotic relationship between farming and forestry, with positive benefits for both the farmer, the livestock, and for the environment. I think we should be doing much more of it. I headed to Manch Estate in West Cork, where the Irish Natural Forestry Foundation has planted up 137 hectares. They've established themselves as a prototype for the benefits of a close-to-nature approach, known as continuous cover forestry.
It's very different to, I suppose, a lot of forestry that you'd see. For a start, it's all broadleaf, and there's a lot of different types of trees all mixed in here.
What we try to do, Anya, is take the existing structure of the grants for landowners to use to plant forestry in their fields. And we, instead of putting in a monoculture of Sitka spruce, we wanted to put in a mixed species to promote a different model of forestry. This, as you can see from the feel of it, it feels like we're in a forest in a very short space of time. And we have lovely mixtures of different species. We've cherry, we've sycamore, we've got larch, and we've got oak in here, with benefits for biodiversity and benefits for well, the wildlife in here. It improves the soil quality. It has benefits for the local community who come and walk here and can have a healthy experience in this environment.
And I love the way that there's already an understory. We've got bits of willow here. We've got this whole structure. It's light, it's open, loads of bird song. It does feel like it's a natural forest, really, isn't it?
There's a myth that if you're planting broadleaf native trees that you've got to wait 100 years before you see a benefit. But within 10 years, here we are in a young forest, but in a resilient forest. These trees have done fantastically well. We haven't used Roundup spray on them. We've let them come up naturally.
I can't believe that this tree here, this is an alder, right?
Yeah.
11 years. It's a fairly decent size for 11 years, isn't it?
It is, and you'll note as well, Anya, that it's also a very good quality piece of timber. And we see that repeated. This is not a one-off. We see that repeated throughout this woodland. You learn at a very young age not to put all your eggs in one basket. So if, for example, we get a disease in one of the species, we're not going to lose the whole forest. If this was a monoculture and we got a disease in that species, the whole thing is wiped out. And that's relevant not only for the landowner who's investing in his trees, but for the citizens whose tax money is going towards funding trying to afforest the country. And it's also relevant for our climate change goals and objectives where we're using trees to take carbon out of the atmosphere for the pollution that we may be causing elsewhere with industry.
But do the numbers really stack up? Commercial forestry has developed around growing uniform-sized trees because it guarantees a surety of supply of the same kind of timber. But can continuous cover forestry provide the right quality of timber and the economic rewards that clear felling typically offers?
And we have to manage in such a way that the other species have an opportunity. And that's really what we're trying to find ways to get to that point.
Paddy Purser is the man who can answer this question because he's already doing it. He makes a living as a commercial forester working with this approach. I caught up with Paddy on a field day.
But most of the mature trees are of good quality. They have different sizes, but they're of good quality.
He's in the process of converting a monoculture conifer plantation to a continuous cover forest for his clients in Rathnew, County Wicklow.
So you've got a huge range of different species here. All sorts of young saplings growing up here, yeah?
That's right, yeah. Yeah, there's Sitka spruce, you've got beech, there's more beech there. We've got oak. So there's a big range of species come, and that's kind of adding diversity to the forest and gives us options in terms of the management in the future as well.
So before you start to manage this forest, what was it like here?
You would have seen more of the mature trees, and you would have had basically nothing underneath. It would have been just a bare forest floor.
But have all of these saplings just regenerated naturally here in the forest, or did you plant them?
No, nothing planted here. Everything is just self-sown. So different tree species have their own strategies of how to regenerate. So some seed is blown on the wind, some comes in with birds, some it just falls down, some is kind of gathered by animals.
From a commercial point of view, you know, when you compare this now with, say, clear-felled forests, you know, where all the trees are planted at one time, they mature at one time, and then they're all clear-felled. How does this work out commercially compared to that type of forestry?
What you're doing with this system is you're foregoing the big check at clear-fell when all the timber is sold in one go, but instead you're getting a regular check on a 5-year or 6-year, depending on your thinning cycle, you're getting that for your thinnings. So, and you're retaining the capital value of your forest, so you still have your asset, but you're taking the interest off of that. So you're foregoing a big payday, but you're getting lots of regular small paydays.
And farmers now planting trees, should they consider this when they're actually at that planting stage? Or can they leave it until later when the trees get to a kind of a more mature stage?
They have options. I mean, just because your forest wasn't planted with this in mind doesn't mean you can't partake. But it does help if you can introduce more diversity of species at an early stage. Yeah, when you clear fell, the monetary value of the forest, all that money is released. But it's the same with the carbon. When you clear fell, most of that carbon is released, and you have to start again with a new forest. You plant a new forest. But in this system, we're retaining the carbon stock. We're creating I suppose, a store, and we're not disturbing that, and that stays intact.
Not only is carbon sequestered and stored in forests, it's also stored in wood. So the more things we can make out of wood, the better. And the more diverse forests there are in our local area, the more opportunities there are for woodworkers and furniture makers to source high-quality local hardwoods. Mark Donnelly's workshop in Ballincollig has the rich smell of resin, and there's a story associated with every piece of wood in the workshop. Much of the wood was sourced at Manch Estate.
This was a tree that was planted in 1815 to celebrate the British victory in the Battle of Waterloo.
Wow.
It was on an estate near Mallow. Blew down about 5 years ago, and what we're doing is make it into a worktop.
That's great.
The house that it's going into was actually built in 1815, so it's a marvellous coincidence.
You're kidding.
And of course the lady who's getting the worktop is thrilled to bits that there's a story in it.
I would say so. That's amazing.
One of Mark's projects is the restoration of this vintage car cabin from one of the first cars in Ireland, dating back to 1910.
Do you think there's potential for more employment in trade like this?
Obviously this is a niche market doing this kind of thing, but there's more mainstream work in the furniture. And I think it's interesting that I do a little bit of work up at Letterfrack, the National Furniture College, and now they're taking on board using native timber, which is excellent because there's nearly, I think there's getting on for 300 students there, so they've all been exposed to it. I'm not suggesting they all go off and work with native timber, but there is more potential, definitely.
The more useful products that we can make out of wood, the better. Things that we use every day and that are durable for the long term. At GMIT campus in Letterfrack, they're working at the cutting edge of technology and design and can produce both in volume and in scale.
So Duncan, this is one of our main machine halls, and I suppose this is one of the main centres of learning for the students because they learn a lot by doing, so their projects are very much orientated towards building on their skills. And the students will learn everything from wood technology to furniture design, but using wood as a medium and being able to manipulate it in as many ways as possibly can.
So this looks very high-tech here, this room.
Yeah, it certainly is. And as the students develop their skills into the programme, they have to become competent, Duncan, in all of the machines that you see in this environment here. And these replicate all the machines that typically they will come across in industry as well in Ireland and overseas, because these are very much international tools in terms of technology as well.
Just have it down. And that's it. No glue.
No glue, no fixings.
Nothing. Lovely.
Easy to be used, yeah. Now we have Sean is with the first years here at the moment.
Hi Sean, how are you? And this is just timber, 0.1 of a millimetre. And look how strong it is.
See how strong it is intentionally, very, very strong.
My God.
The students at GMIT Letterfrack are winning major awards for their innovative designs.
And when you look at all the thinning that's coming out of our young forests now, you know, even hardwoods and softwoods, but the characteristics of Irish wood too, you know, there's wonderful possibilities there. Do you see this as a kind of an opportunity for the college?
I think it's a definite opportunity, but I think there's a real necessity for doing research into what we're going to do with that source material, because there's going to be a lot of it coming on stream, particularly thinnings from hardwoods that have been planted over the last 10 years. And as opposed to just burning it as a fuel, which a lot of it is going towards, we need to look at what value we can add to that material. And that's certainly an area that we're beginning to work in ourselves. We use predominantly hardwood timbers, and as you know, there's a very lack of supply of good quality hardwood in Ireland. So we import a vast majority of our timber into Ireland, and that's the students will also use mostly imported hardwoods. Because a lot of the hardwood is imported, there is a certain disconnect with students and the source material. So one of the things, for instance, that we've done in the last 3 years is that we've developed a native woodland plot ourselves here, combining that with collaborating with the National Park in Letterfrack. And we've planted 5 acres of native woodland. And we're using that very much as an educational plot to inform our students about where timber comes from, the issues about growing timber, about quality, etc., and also potentially using source material from there in future student projects. So it really is trying to close the loop completely on the material supply stream.
Okay guys, so this is our community native woodland. Last year and the year before, all the students in the college and people from the local community would have planted all these. So this is birch, and as you can see, it's much slower growing than the others. I mean, this is only a year planted now, but at the same time, there's some of the alders, this is a year as well. You can see the difference between the two. So this guy is really fast growing.
And what other species have you down here?
And we've some oak, holly, Scots pine, those kind of species.
One way or another, an area of land about the size of County Limerick is going to be planted with trees over the next 20 years. This is clearly an opportunity for farmers and landowners, but it also comes with a huge responsibility.
Every time we plant a forest, it's there for generations. It changes everything around it, and it affects all of us.